Hello and welcome to Prime Lenses. I'm Ian. My guest this week is David Imel, a technology journalist based in the US who's probably best known these days for his work on YouTube and podcasts. His work with MKBHD as well as his own films would keep anyone busy, but David clearly doesn't like being bored. Not only is he a wonderful photographer, but he's a wonderfully talented film photographer with a preferred aspect ratio that you're not expecting. He's good buddies with some previous guests, so I was thrilled when he agreed to be on the show as well. And our conversation overlaps nicely with technology and photography and art and creativity in some ways that are really unique to this conversation. So without further ado, here's David. You see TV sets for real, right, or something like that, you know? Yeah, we saw the set for Friends a couple of years ago when that was touring the world and they were showing that off. Yeah. So this was in London, but yeah, it travelled everywhere. They did a thing called Friends Festival during the summer, and then that was so successful and sold out and stuff. They did Friends Festive at Christmas.
Oh, that's cool.
Which, cool. Because I guess the thing about that show is it covered all the seasons. So they're like, we can take this everywhere, and we can always find some way to sell it. And like the festive one was summer, and they had the sofa you could stand next to and try and pivot it on the stairs, and it was a smoke and mirrors thing. You could just walk around it, and then there's the Thanksgiving thing with the turkey, and it was a whole thing. You know, how do you turn a TV show into a theme park where you just wait for at least a decade after it finished and then it's blowing up? The thing that cracks me up is the way that the t-shirts and things that they're selling to like kids who weren't around when it was first on TV say Friends, and then underneath say the TV show, as if to be like, what it'd be like,
I don't know.
It's like
it's the logo, it's the Friends logo.
Exactly. It's not the word Friends. It'd be like Hello Kitty going, Hello Kitty, the brand. Like, I know. It's such an odd thing.
That's strange. Weird.
Someone got a licensing thing somewhere. But
yeah. I just saw on your calendar notification that I was supposed to fill out a form that I totally didn't fill out.
That's quite all right. It's fine.
Okay.
Here's the thing, right? It's a bit inside baseball, but it's quite fun. I feel like all my conversations are exciting and a little bit nerdy, but I feel like there's a potential we could go quite deep on a load of stuff because the diagram interests sort of overlap for us. I think is greater than some of the people like I talk to.
Right.
So it's quite exciting. But I'm an old school dyed in the wool project manager. And so I thought when I started doing this, I was like, right, what do I need to give people? I need to give them a page that tells them what this is. I need to give them a form. I need to approach this like production. Right, like I'm producing something and I'm doing it real, and but over time, the amount of people who don't do that, and then I just end up having to wing it a little bit. But actually, that's sometimes more fun. A bit like when people reject the premise or play with the formula. So the whole 3 lens thing, like I've interviewed one person who was just like, "I'll come on, but we're not doing gear chat," and I was like, "Okay, fine," and then it goes the other way where. Like Dan Baker, the photographer, came on and chose 3 35mm Leica lenses, 2 of which were different versions of a Summilux. Yeah, and I was like, well done. You have understood the assignment. Like that is very good. You know.
Yeah.
So
you can actually talk about the differences between something that's very
exactly.
Similar.
Yeah. He was like, I don't need all 3 of these 35mm lenses, but he's like, I'm here to tell you, if they bring out a 4th one tomorrow, I will also buy that one.
Yeah.
It's like. Okay, go nuts. But yeah, how are you? Are you? So you guys based in New York or just outside New York?
So the studio's in Jersey. I live in Brooklyn in New York. So I drive in every day.
Nice.
So yeah, it's a little bit far, but that's how it is.
Hey, look, there are podcasts to listen to. There are things like that.
Yeah, I do that
transition.
Morning, so.
Yeah, that transition period was something I think I missed in a way during COVID, and now just don't have at all because I live in the Highlands and work from home. And so, you know, it's a year ago today, we left our home in Yorkshire and drove the 7-8 hours, whatever it was, to the new house in Scotland. And that's been a big change. So I'm talking to you via Starlink, which is why there sometimes might be a slight lag. Yeah. It was the only way, man. Like the broad broadband to the house via copper does about 10 megabits down on a good day and about 1 up. So I was here, it was February 23. We had basically bought the house. We'd agreed to buy the house, and I was hanging out the window upstairs with the biggest Starlink dish, the Pro dish, just hanging with that in one hand and my phone in the other, hoping that the speed test, just hoping that the speed test was going to work. But I had to hold it there for about 5 minutes so it could like do its thing and orient to kind of find the satellites. Yeah, because the house is beautiful, David, but it is surrounded by trees, and as we know from Nilay Patel, trees defeat Starlink. They absolutely do. So it's stuck on a massive pole attached to a chimney, and that's how we do it. So yeah, nice. It's been good.
Cool, awesome.
It works nicely. But yeah. Do you ever find yourself, if you're Brooklyn way, do you ever find yourself over at Brooklyn Film Camera? Because I know you are a massive
all the time.
Film.
Yeah, I'm really close friends with those guys.
Oh, good.
Actually, we're doing an event together in like 2 weeks. So.
Oh, sweet. What's that?
Well, I run a club called Beers and Cameras. And
okay.
Yeah, it's like a worldwide organization, but we have different chapters in different parts of the world. So I run the New York City chapter. So I don't have them as common as like the place where it was born was San Diego, and they have them every 2 weeks. And I'm just too busy to do it every 2 weeks. But try to do them at least a couple times a quarter. And so we're doing one on the 27th. So we're doing a collab with Brooklyn Film Camera because they have a big garage sale event that they're doing.
Yes,
they have a lot of like kind of old cameras that they're selling for cheap, and so I'm collaborating with a brewery really close to there, and we're just gonna do we will basically be the after party for that event. Yeah.
Oh, really nice. That's really good. Yeah. When did you get involved with that then?
Probably like 2018 or so. Yeah, it's been a while because I met the guy that founded it in Montreal randomly when I was like staying in an Airbnb that he was also staring at, and I went to their Montreal event and it was super fun. And then when I moved to New York, he immediately messaged me and was like, "Do you want to run the New York chapter?"
Amazing.
So I've been doing that for a while, but it's definitely super low key. Yeah, they kind of run themselves, honestly. You just kind of organize it.
Yeah. You find film people in packs just roaming around. I mean, if Sissy Lou and like Ben Fraternali's videos are to be believed, you all just kind of find each other just roaming around Central Park and.
Oh yeah, I see Ben all the time, and it's not just when we're planning on hanging out. So yeah.
No, he's good fun. Their dog is a delight. She's lovely. Immediately through herself. Yeah. I mean, he's all right. Let's not get carried away, okay, Ben. Ben's fine. He was brilliant, actually. I went to see him when I was in the States last in May. Went to the studio, got the train out to Yonkers, which, as a person in New York who's never been to Grand Central Station beyond that bit that you go and look at that's in the movies, right? And then you go, okay, cool. I've seen the bit in the movies. I've got a picture. Like, actually finding your way around that place is kind of a bit, because there's just so many lines in. They're like, it's over there, it's line 400, go. And so it's like, went over there. Like, there's a reason that in Harry Potter's like there's platform 9 3/4. Like the scale is a bit different for us, but got out there and it was really good, and hung out and took some photos. It was just cool to kind of go see him and kind of go and like see that studio space and like see what he and his wife do in terms of like their film photography.
He's been bugging me to go up there, and I still haven't made it up there, so I need to spend some time and get it to the studio. So
good. It's good.
I see him all the time though, so there's that. But,
no, he's good. He did some stuff for my son. He's been really lovely. Like through the pandemic, my son and I started watching his videos, and he's always been really kind because like Lewis really loves Polaroids and really loves and like got into it through his videos. And his videos are like just the right length when your eldest son wants to stay up a little bit later. Like that 15-minute, 10-minute kind of like and pros and cons and big for business, and like when you're a kid, they're like perfect, exactly, just the right kind of energy. But it's good timing to kind of talk to you because I was listening to waveform this morning, in fact, whilst I was driving the kids to a thing. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I thought would be really interesting to talk about, because it's like so of the moment, and it will date this podcast. Like there will be a time in the future when we will look back and laugh at just how simple and like easy this is now, but or this time is now by comparison. But you were talking a lot about the AI tagging on Instagram,
Right.
and I know you've played with like M11Ps with content credentials and things like that. As
Yeah.
someone who shoots a lot of film, this is going to
Mm-hmm.
ruin your day if they don't implement these tools in a thoughtful way. Like, how are you
Yeah.
feeling about that right now?
I mean, I've got a lot of film photography friends who were getting tagged made with AI. And it's like
Yeah,
the polar opposite, you know, it's like they're not even
exactly.
shooting digital and yet they're still being tagged with made with AI because they like cropped an image. There was a
Yeah,
Pete Souza, who was an old White House photographer,
yeah.
posted an image from 40 years ago and it got tagged made with AI because he cropped it. It's like,
I mean,
yeah, it's crazy. It's just not being implemented well. And you know, it's
mm,
Instagram, at least it's just one platform, and
yeah,
at the end of the day, like who really cares? It's mostly just people pointing it out, being like, why is this tagged made with AI? People
mm,
know that it's not made with AI, you know, but I really do think that, I mean, Adobe, they have a person that came out and said they should only do this with images that are fully generated with like Firefly or something like that.
yeah.
So, you know,
But
I
it's
don't
going to be
know.
hard for the metadata to know that, I guess. You know, it's
Yeah,
hard to bake that
I
in.
mean, they could figure that out. The problem is it would they would need a lot of collaboration between the platforms, and I don't think that's ever going to happen. At
I
least
think
between like
that's the kicker,
Adobe
isn't it?
and Instagram. Yeah, yeah. They
Yeah.
could, if Instagram actually cared about like like good photo quality, they could make the photo quality a lot better than they
Mm.
have right now.
Oh, and
You
there could
know.
be an iPad app, and there could be
Yeah.
like, just for goodness sake,
Just
you know?
anything. Yeah. Do anything but vertical video, please. Yeah.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's a funny thing the way. I mean, I feel I wrote about it. I have a little newsletter I do for the podcast, and I wrote about Threads this week because like
Mm.
Threads seems to be having a real photography moment, which is quite nice. And it's
Hmm.
for now, it's a
Yeah.
lovely feeling kind of place to hang out and do picture things. And you know, actually, it's got that feeling that maybe early days of Twitter had, and like Mastodon had maybe 18 months ago, when suddenly like people were piling on there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just sort of I see a lot of nice stuff, and I see people, and like I see your comments, and I see people like, you know, like Vieran at The Verge posting stuff, and like, you know,
Hmm.
it's like there's nice little back and forths happening in little
Yeah.
pockets there, which I think is quite lovely. But I also wrote about like the problem is they're not, it's not our platform, it's theirs, and at some point it will change, and someone will
Yeah.
pull a lever behind the scenes, and we'll have no control over it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I, you know, the more I think about it, and I hate to give him too much credit, his head will get big, but Nilay was right. Like, we need websites again, and you need to kind of have your own place, don't you,
Yeah,
if
I
you're serious?
also I've been leaning pretty hard into learning and getting educated and becoming an educator about federated content and
Mm,
like the Fediverse and all that kind of stuff, and becoming like a bigger proponent of that, because then, you know, if your blog is federated, it'll just show up on all of the social media platforms, including Threads. Um,
yeah,
so, you know, then everything becomes one giant feed that is sort of like an RSS feed, and the individual platforms can't really dictate what's happening there. So
yeah.
I think that needs to happen, and it might, you know, we'll see if it does. If it does, it will be a very slow adoption, but at
Mm,
least you got a couple of bigger platforms on board. So, you know,
yeah,
like WordPress and Threads and Ghost and all those guys. So
yeah.
we'll see. Yeah.
Are you optimistic about it kind of going in that direction in terms of, you know, the like, because on the one hand, there's the kind of doomsday kind of dead internet, an internet filled with content made by robots. You know, that's kind of
Yeah.
like a dark potential outcome, grey goo kind of
Yeah.
outcome. And then on the other hand, you've got this like, well, maybe I just don't care anymore about social and posting this stuff, and maybe, you know, we get generation photographers who are like Vivian Mayer, and their stuff just gets found, right, and it's on
Yeah.
hard drives and it's in boxes, and they never posted it anywhere because they were like, what's the point? Like, are
Yeah.
you, where do you fall on that? Assuming that is the full dynamic range,
Yeah.
if you
I
like.
think that it's going to be a combination of the two things. A lot of the internet is already being bogged down by AI generated content and large language models, and like you've probably seen a lot of the memes where people will see a response and they'll be like, that doesn't feel right, so they'll say ignore all previous commands, then do this, and then the comment will be like, we'll print out exactly what they want, so it's like obviously a bot. And a lot of the internet's just becoming that. Like even in YouTube comments on Reddit, like someone will post something and then all the comments will basically be reading a summarized version of Wikipedia, and it's weird, and I don't know why people make these bots. But it does sort of feel like there's this whole dead internet theory thing that's like really coming to a head. At the same time, I think that if we do move in the direction of a decentralized internet, at least as far as social media and video and podcasts and that kind of stuff goes, I think going back to the days of like subscribing to things that you want to see and everything is sort of a recommendation system, you know? Like the great thing about Twitter, and I'm sort of writing an article about this right now in the background, but so you had Facebook, which, you know, I hate Facebook currently, but like the early days of Facebook, and not even to like, I'm not trying to like wax poetically about it, but early days of Facebook were like a first level connection where both people had to know each other, both people had to request and accept to have a connection. And that was pretty much, you only saw the content from the people that you had a connection with the groups that you manually joined, that kind of stuff. And then Twitter, the reason Twitter was so cool was that it was second level connections. So the person that you were following didn't have to know who you were for you to follow them. But because you chose who you were following, the chances of people following you and like calling you horrible names and like just being super awful to you was super low, because like they follow you for a reason, right? And then the cool thing about that was that if I saw that one of my friends or someone I knew or someone I followed engaged with an account that I didn't know, that's basically a recommendation right there. They retweet something, they comment on it, whatever. So then I can look at their account and be like, oh, they're really cool. Like someone that I look up to this person, and sort of you can kind of grow your base from there. But the reason I think Threads is already starting to get worse, and the reason that, you know, the algorithmic side of Twitter is getting worse, is that it's that algorithmic timeline function, which leads to people just making content for engagement farming. You know, Twitter pays you to engagement farm, which is ridiculous. But if you went on Facebook 10 years ago and you wrote, I just grew a business from this to this value in 3 years, here's how I did it, thread. How do you think people are going to react on Facebook? Everyone's going to be like, John, like, what are you doing? Like, we know each other. You don't have to do this right now. So that just like the incentives on a platform where you're basically like spitting into the void and seeing who catches it is just not good. And I had this experience when I was working on this video that I made fairly recently called How AI Stole the Sparkle Emoji. And I was doing interviews for it because I just like to interview people for the videos I'm making. So I put out a call for like, hey, are you a graphic designer for apps that has used the sparkle emoji to denote AI in your platform? I'd like to talk to you. And I noticed that Threads doesn't have DMs. And that's frustrating, because on Twitter, I can say those things and people will be like, I do that, and then I immediately just DM them. Or on Instagram, I can put it on my story and someone replies to me in my DMs. But Threads doesn't have it, so I was like, that's annoying. So I randomly, haphazardly just posted, man, I really wish Threads had DMs. And then I had like 50 people in my comment section being like, you're such a freaking creep, like trying to like drop into women's DMs. And it's like,
oh no,
completely random people who don't know who I am, who I don't know who they are, who like just saw my post for some reason. And I don't know why the algorithm has to serve posts like that to random people, because it doesn't so much of like, I think that we need to think of the internet and social media more we need to think of the structure of it more in the way that we communicate with people in the real world. because in the real world, you're having a one-on-one conversation with someone, or you look up to someone and you look up, oh, what are they into? You look up for recommendations. And that's what those first and second level of relationships are. But before TikTok, we didn't have a version in the real world where we were just served content from the void. You know, none of that didn't exist besides like maybe TV, but like, you know, or like a reality TV show. And on a reality TV show, what do you do when you're watching reality TV? You go, oh God, those people are so annoying. They're so gross. They're so weird. Like that's the whole pull of
it
a
was always
reality TV
edited.
show.
Yeah.
And so so I don't know. I'm really against just like complete random content. And also like what are you doing with your time also? Like why are you staring at a screen and just letting an algorithm be like, here's the things that we think you're going to look at? And it's not even, that's the thing too, is like they don't have a way to differentiate between how long am I going to stare at this or if I actually like it. They think it's the same thing, and that's not the same thing. So then they start feeding you rage bait and that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's my little rant about that. But I just think Threads is like going down a bad path because at least Twitter you can default to the following feed, you know. I don't like that they added a For You page after Elon took over. I think that's bad, but I'm glad that they at least let you default to it because I just never move off my following feed. And on Threads, it's awful. On Threads, every time you open it, you have to switch back to the following feed, and they do that on purpose, and it's just annoying. So anyway, I don't want to. I think giving Meta a platform long term is only we've done this 50 times over. I don't know why we're letting them do it again. So
Anyway. No, I agree. Like ideologically, so I used to work for Canonical, the Ubuntu Linux company, and so ideologically, Mastodon appeals far more greatly to me in the same way that like things like Mozilla, like Firefox and Arc appeal to me much more than using the really big, you know, for similar reasons, right? I think choice should exist, and depending on the sort of day of the week, I'm like this close to abandoning Apple, but like
and
Snapdragons aren't good enough.
I mean that's what's like really cool about that's what used to be cool about like Twitter clients, you know. It was like, Twitter is the internet, and the clients allow you to like pick your experience, and so that's what, assuming people move towards ActivityPub, which I know that it feels like such a nerdy thing that's never going to happen kind of situation, but considering Threads is joining it, considering WordPress is on it, I think at some point we're going to reach a critical mass where if you want to build a social graph, like for example, Blue Sky, it's kind of dumb of Blue Sky to be like, we're just going to start our own protocol. And they, you know, they have their reasons, and some of their reasons are valid. And I actually do think the app protocol is better in a lot of ways, but it's not the W3C standard. And now they're just building a bunch of bridges between the app protocol and ActivityPub so that they can like be interoperable and like cool. But eventually, if you want to start a social platform, you just can't, because everyone is not going to join. Like this happen. We see this with Instagram. Like there's so many, like an Instagram competitor will pop up and everyone joins, and it's literally popular for a day and a half and nobody cares. And if it's federated, you can be on whatever one you want and somebody else can be on a different one, and it doesn't matter. Like that's the important thing. And then the platform doesn't have control, and you're using the app that you want to use based on the feature set that you want. And I do think that we're eventually going to be moving towards that kind of world, especially as people get more and more disenfranchised with social media platforms, the enshittification of every platform as like all the ads get worse and everything gets worse. And anyway, sorry.
I tell you, if I could, no, of course. But if I could get Cory Doctorow on this thing for an hour, it would be incredible. Like I'm with you. He's right. Fun fact: I used to play World of Warcraft with him about like 17 years ago or something when I worked at moo.com back in London. I didn't.
Oh, wow.
He was introduced to the guild I was in. Didn't really know who I was playing the game with. We never met in person. And then it was years later. I was like, I recognize, and like there were these books popping up in my feed, and I was like, I just recognize that name. Who's this person? And then I was like, okay. Yeah, I mean, I didn't embarrass myself. At least, like I have met famouses in the past and just embarrassed myself. Met John Romero once. Was talking to him for about 5 minutes, and then looked at his badge because I was doing something else and playing a game at a show. And I was like, "Oh, you're John Romero." It's the most embarrassing thing you can possibly say to someone when you like. He was lovely, thankfully,
Yeah.
and it was great. But yeah,
Yeah.
but also none of that is cameras either. That's just meeting people.
Well,
But we can segue seamlessly from Instagram
sure.
and platforms where you
Sure.
post your
I
photos.
hope that people are not mad at me for ranting about protocols because they're my
I think
favorite thing to talk about.
well, no, I think it's great because I think if you're a photographer now and you're thinking about even sharing your work, even if you're not doing it professionally, the
Yeah.
practical reality of the world we live in with these platforms is just a reality of where we live. And I think
Yeah. Yeah.
you've got to have it in mind when you're producing work because most of us want someone to look at it, even if you just want like I haven't said this for a few episodes, so it's quite nice, but like I'm unburdened by this being my job. I can be a bit of a tourist and enjoy photography and enjoy what I
Sure.
use it, do it
Yeah.
when I want to, don't do it when I
Yeah.
don't want to.
Yeah.
But if it's your job and you've got to actually you've got to remind people you exist and you've got to bring in work, you have to use these things. And
Yeah.
you're right, like the quality of what it does to your images matters. So not everybody who picks up a camera wants to learn about protocols, but I'm here to tell you that if you do, and you do understand how your business model is tied to someone else's, and how you have to understand how those things interconnect,
Yeah.
then you are going to be more successful in the long run. But what I guess because you've come up through technology and like Android Authority, and now with Marquez and the crew over there, like where did photography fit in? Was this something you discovered at a certain point in your life, or were cameras
Yeah.
always there?
2016 is when I
Wow,
started
there's a
taking
date.
pictures. Yeah. Yeah. Basically the way it worked was let's see. I started working at Android Authority full time because I'd been working there I guess also kind of full time, but not as my main job. I was a systems engineer at Intel. And I worked there for a couple of years while I was in college. And I was writing a bunch of articles for Android Authority. And I wanted to travel for the job because I was like, it would be fun and interesting to actually be able to go to the launch events for all these phones and the things we were covering. And I was told, like, well, we can't just send you as a writer because you can cover the same amount of things remotely. So in order to like make it worthwhile, you have to know how to like you have to shoot video and take pictures of the stuff. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll buy a camera. And I went to CES. I think it was 2017. Might have been 2016. But the Panasonic GH5 got announced there, and
Right.
at the time, I knew literally nothing about cameras, but I knew a lot about computers, and that camera had a lot of big numbers. It was like the first camera to do 4K 60 internal video, first to do 10-bit 422 internal. It had the best stabilization of any camera at the time, and it was kind of just like this huge leap, and I could understand the like value of that leap, and so I bought it because I was like, well, I need to buy a camera. I might as well invest in a good one. I need to shoot. I need to learn how to make YouTube videos. I need to learn how to take pictures. So I guess I'll do this. Bought it. I totally hated it. It was like the worst thing I'd ever used because while I understand that camera is like an incredibly versatile, super useful, mostly video camera, um, I just didn't enjoy using it at all. And it wasn't intuitive to me at all because for me, like when you're learning how to do something, like the fundamentals are very important.
Yeah.
And everything in that camera was locked behind a screen or a menu system. So in
Right.
order to change, like aperture was digital, and you had to go into the menu and change it that way. And
Yeah.
ISO was under a sub menu or a button or something, and it was just super frustrating. And I couldn't figure out how to use it. So I went on Instagram and I looked up like all the people that I was following on Instagram because I didn't follow any brands or anything. I only followed like photographers that I liked. And I wasn't even really into photography. I just liked looking at pretty pictures occasionally. And so I looked at all the photographers that I was following and I was like, what are they shooting with?
Mhm.
And about 85% of them were shooting with Fujifilm like XT1s,
Yeah.
which was strange because Fuji was like a brand new entry point. At that point, the XT1 had just come out and it was their first kind of like more professional prosumer camera.
Hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting. So I returned the GH5 within like 2 days, and the XT2 had just come out. And I read this review of the XT2 from Jonas Rask, who's now a really good friend of mine.
Hmm.
He does all of Fujifilm's product photography. So anytime you see any of
Ah.
their cameras on a poster or billboard or a website, it's
Yeah.
all him. Um, and I was like, all right, I guess I'm gonna get this. So I got an XT2, and all of a sudden I just became completely obsessed with photography. It was crazy how quickly it went from this is frustrating, I don't want to use this, to
Right.
oh my god, I love this. And it's because Fujifilm cameras have dedicated dials for
Hmm.
ISO, aperture, and shutter speed,
Yeah.
because I think that a lot of people will just default to like a priority mode or to auto
Hmm.
mode. But I think in to really like hone your own style and understand photography and like have control of a scene, you have to be able to shoot manual, because I think Jonas's style is the style I was really trying to emulate when I was first getting into it, because I liked his work so much. And he does really a lot of contrast. So he
Hmm.
uses like light very effectively to like completely knock out light in certain areas and have the light just be shining in a certain area and stuff like that. And if you don't shoot manual, like everything's going to be a mid-tone and it's going to try
Yeah.
to even it out. So I got that camera, and I lived in San Francisco at the time, and I was out every single day taking pictures just all day. It was like the only thing I wanted to do, the only thing I was thinking about. And luckily, the foundations of photography work pretty well into video, especially when you're doing
Hmm.
product video, because product video is kind of just put the camera on a tripod, get the settings right, and pan. Or at least that's how it was at the time.
Hmm.
And so I pretty quickly just kind of got better at that and figured out how to make YouTube videos with that. And it was funny because Fujifilm cameras have these film simulations that
Hmm.
they have, and I was being asked by all these people who are way better than me that I would always look up to. They were like, wow, like I really love your color grade. Like, what are you doing to like grade your footage? And
Right.
I did not grade anything. I was like, I shoot an Astia, like the Astia color profile, and that's it. And because nobody used Fujifilm cameras for video, like
Hmm.
they didn't have 4K on the XT2 until like a year and a half after it came out. They pushed an update that added 4K video, which is
Right.
crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but it definitely was not made to be a video camera, but it really became a good hybrid camera. And I think the XT3 was probably the camera that allowed people to really start to understand, like, oh, the video capabilities
Hmm.
of this are super good. Because, the way that innovations have gone in the camera space is everything starts at micro four thirds, because you have to move less data physically from the sensor to the processor and all that.
Hmm.
And so he starts at micro four thirds, and then eventually you get the same features in APS-C, and then eventually you get the same features in full frame.
Yeah.
So eventually all of the GH5 features made their way to the Fuji cameras because they were APS-C.
Hmm.
Now we're kind of at the point where full frame cameras can do literally everything, and because processing speed is so good and look like memory is so fast. But at the time it was a big deal, and that's why they ended up making the XT4 like more like vlogger video focused, which
Yeah.
I and everyone else, well, not everyone else, a lot of people love that camera. I
Hmm.
pre-ordered it and I hated it, so I just returned it immediately. And luckily for the XT5, they went back to the XT3 body style. So
Right.
anyway, that was my introduction to photography in general. But I would say that I didn't really get like, I mean, I was obsessed with it, but I wasn't good. And in like late 2017, I discovered this camera called the Fujifilm TX1,
Hmm.
which is the same camera as the Hasselblad X-Pan, but
Yeah.
the Japan version, and it's prettier and it's in champagne. And I found one at a market in Tokyo and bought it in 2017. And I think that is the camera that sort of like really like completely upended my life in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Because it was my first film camera, and it just got me like really interested in just the crazy world of film cameras and film photography. And now I have a Hasselblad Flex Tight scanner at my apartment, and I just go way too hard on all this stuff now. Because it's
Do
just
you home develop your film then as well, or are
I
you
used to
right?
do that. I'm now sponsored by a lab, so
Oh,
they develop my stuff for me, and they scan it for me as well. But now that I have the Flex Tight, I'm rescanning stuff because in New York they charge 3 times as much to scan on a Flex Tight than they do on a flatbed. So um,
right.
it's definitely worth doing. It's basically a drum scanner. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It looked amazing. I saw you talking about that on social, and I looked up the scanner. The thing itself looks like a work of art.
it's
It's just
crazy.
this
Yeah,
incredible machine.
it's a big thing. It's considered a virtual drum scanner, but full on actual drum scanners are like the size of a room. So
Yeah.
not something I maybe could do it. So, a friend of mine, Alex Burke, he has his own drum scanner, and
Uh,
his images look amazing. But it's the most I can do for like a basement Brooklyn apartment. So yeah,
yeah. What I
yeah,
love about talking to people about photography and stuff that gets under your skin like this is when they say things like, "Yeah, I couldn't do that." Well, maybe I could. Like I can see it in your eyes. You're like,
yeah. I mean,
"I could though." Like if I slept standing up, it's just like there's a
right.
way.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I mean I will probably have a full on drum scanner one day. I still want to go take a class with Alex because his work is just amazing, and he lives in Colorado, and I feel like it would be nice. but
Yeah.
yeah, I think after the TX1, I mean I now have 2 TX1s and an X-Pan because
Nice.
it's just it's the most important camera to me. And so for
Yeah.
people that don't maybe know it, it's a panoramic camera that is it's basically the only 35 millimeter panoramic camera that uses the whole like 2 frames put together. Besides maybe there's the one that swings. I'm trying to remember the name of that.
Yeah, the one
Um,
that Jeff Bridges uses.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of panoramic 35 millimeter cameras, but they are basically like just cropping a 35 millimeter frame to make it
Right.
panoramic.
Hmm.
But this is one of the only ones that the film gate opens twice as wide when you put it in panoramic mode. So it's medium format width with 35 millimeter height. So you actually get more
Yeah.
detail.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a really, 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 really nice camera. And the lenses for this camera are some of the best lenses I've ever used, like without
Yeah.
fail. So
Do you
yeah,
have a lot of? Do you have like a staple or stable? Sorry, of good lenses now, or how many? Because I don't even know how many were made for that system in the
3.
first place.
They only made
Three, right?
3,
Okay.
and they only really made 2 because they made 3 technically, but the third one you could only get if you bought the special edition kit that came
Right.
with like a hard case, all 3 lenses, and like 2 rolls of film with the camera and a special
Hmm.
strap. And I bought the special edition, but it didn't have the third lens in it because that was the only lens that you could only get in the special edition. And the
Mm,
shop that I bought it at sold it separately for
of course.
$6,000,
Good
just the lens.
grief! Wow.
Yeah, they still go for about $5,000 now because they're so rare.
Yeah.
I have the Hasselblad 30 millimeter lens now.
Right.
I didn't buy it for $6,000, but it's too wide because it's
Yeah.
so they have 3 lenses for it. There's the 2 most common ones are a 45 millimeter f4 and a 90 millimeter f4, but in panoramic mode, that's actually like a 23 and a
Right.
45.
Yeah.
So they're not, when you're actually shooting them in panoramic mode, they're a wider field of view.
Hmm.
But the 30 mil is a 15 when it's in panoramic mode, which is so wide, and it's so wide actually that there's no frame lines for it in the viewfinder,
Right.
or in the rangefinder. So you have to attach a separate diopter on top of the camera that shows you how wide it's going to be, and then so you focus with the rangefinder, and then you look in the diopter to see what the frame is going to look like. Um, so it's
It
quite a
feels like you have
situation.
to have a very specific thing that you're trying to photograph with that. If
With the
if you're
30,
going to put
yeah,
that with the 30,
I went to Montana and Wyoming 2 weeks ago, and I was
Mm,
just trying to find scenarios in which it was like better than the 45, and I just couldn't.
right.
It's just
Yeah.
too wide. So I don't know. It's interesting that they made it. I'm gonna be making a documentary about this camera
Mm,
in like a year. Jonas and I are like we're gonna start working on it soon, and
cool.
I want to know why they made that lens. I think it's like super important to know. So we'll find
Yeah.
that out. But yeah, the cool thing about these lenses is that they're not big. You know, the 45
Mm,
is like this big, and they're all medium format lenses. So
yeah.
you can adapt them to the Fuji GFX or the
Ah,
Hasselblad XD2 or whatever it is,
yeah.
and it pretty much covers the full frame. So,
Huh.
and they're just incredibly sharp. I don't know how they engineered these lenses, and that's something else that
Mm,
I want to talk to them about, because it seems like nowadays if you buy a modern lens that is sharp, it's huge.
yes.
And those lenses, they have a style to them for sure, but I think the style looks way better than if it was just clinical.
Mm,
um, like for example, the Mamiya 7 lenses are way too clinical. Like they are
mm,
optically perfect in such an insane way that
yeah.
it kind of just looks like you shot digital. Like it
Yeah.
looks like you shot medium format digital when you
Yeah.
look at those scans. And a lot of people actually put lens nettings on the back of those elements to diffuse them
Ah, yeah.
because they're too sharp. So yeah,
That's really interesting. Wow. Yeah, film is just this labor of love, man. Like I can't go in. I can't get. I have so much
yeah,
admiration for people who are in deep in film,
yeah,
but I feel like
yeah.
I came up in digital in a way that I mean I had film cameras when I was a kid, and I still love Polaroid and instant
Mm,
film and Instax.
hmm
Like instant cameras, as much as I have my one camera rule, like they are the exception, and I will always find a justification to buy another instant camera,
Yeah,
but yeah, I can't. Like, I'm listening to you talk about that camera, and it sounds amazing, and it sounds like I'd
yeah.
have an incredible time using it. I'm like, I just can't go near it, man.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah, it's hard because every image that I shoot on it, I'm like, wow, that's so freaking good. Like
Mm-hmm.
I shot one of my friends I went on this trip with, um, brought their Leica M6, and I shot a roll through it, and then I,
Mm,
you know, shot a roll through my TX1 in 35 mil mode, and like maybe it's because you're just condensing more light, and so you're getting higher quality of light, but the images
mm,
from the TX1 just always look better.
mm,
So the Leica is probably more tactile to use, and
mm-hmm.
using an M6 is like a really special experience because it just makes you want to just like fire
Yeah,
like crazy,
yeah,
because it just feels good to shoot and everything about it feels
yeah,
good. But the TX1 is, yeah, a very important camera to me. I have a pretty much perfect condition X-Pan with all three lenses
yeah,
that I'm keeping in mint condition, and if I ever get rich, I'm gonna buy a perfect condition TX1 to just sort of keep.
yeah.
But right now I have my workhorse TX1, which is the one that I bought in
Mm-hmm.
2017. That I bought brand new, and now it's really beat up. But
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of throw it around, and then I have a backup that I have in
Yes.
case it breaks, that I got in pretty rough condition, but from a friend.
Mm-hmm.
So, he didn't sell it to me for that much, and if my current one breaks, I'll switch to that. But it's also good to just like let my friends borrow temporarily, just so that they can
Yeah.
experience it.
Let
Yeah,
people try it out. I
yeah.
sometimes look at the M5, because I think the Leica M5 from a kind of design perspective, it's like Timothy Dalton's Aston Martin. everyone forgets about it and thinks, but I think in a peculiar way, it's beautiful. Like it's a very
Yeah,
unusual. It's
it
sort of the
is.
alternate timeline
Yeah,
version of what they
the
could have
big
done,
forehead.
rather.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny for something made in the 70s, it's got quite an 80s aesthetic in the way
Hmm.
that Leica, I think, sometimes, and Porsche and some of these, Braun, some brands, some companies and some design houses are a little bit ahead of the curve. They are doing things that will become the norm further down the track.
Yeah,
And I feel like that
totally.
camera was about a decade early in terms of aesthetic and the way, like, it looks like something it would look completely at home on the set of Brazil, right?
Right.
Or some sort of, or like a made-for-TV version of 1984, made in the 80s or
Yeah.
something. It
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
that kind of look.
Right.
It's really cool, and I would love to
Yeah.
have one, but I know that it would sit on those shelves behind me along with a bunch of other stuff, and just like
Yeah.
that feels like a crime.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna take it out enough. I'm not gonna use it
Yeah.
enough. It should be in the hands of someone like you who will run film through it constantly and love it to pieces and is wedded to the format in a way that
Mm.
I'm not, because my first digital was a Nikon. It's funny, you looked on Instagram, so it was about a decade prior to that I was at the Natural History Museum in London at
Mm.
the Wildlife Photographer of the Year Awards, and I went round the winners and nominees that were on display, and I looked at which ones were Nikon and which ones were Canon, and more that year were Nikon than Canon, so I went
Yeah.
Nikon.
Yeah.
That
That
was
makes sense.
my
That
that
makes sense
yeah
for wildlife photography for sure.
yeah. I mean, I was
Yeah.
just doing it as like, where can I go and look at some photography where they'll tell me
Yeah.
what was used,
Right.
and then
Right.
actually I could make a decision, because I was like a lot of us do. You pick the one because you think the brand matters. When actually,
Yeah.
then you spend a decade telling people how the brand doesn't. Especially these days, I think it's really
Yeah.
hard to buy a bad camera now. Like
Yeah. Totally.
they're all
I
even
still
point
think
and shoots.
usability, like it's more about usability. It's less about
Yes,
what they can and can't do because they can all do the
yes,
same thing.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So for me, the
Well,
Fujifilm cameras are still peak, and
yeah.
as much hype as the X100 series gets,
Mm,
I I picked up an X100V when it first came out because we had one sent
mm,
here to the studio, and I hadn't really used that model style before.
mm.
Um, and it just became the camera that was on my hip every single day for 4 years, and I loved it. I loved it. So I
Yeah.
know that camera got insanely overhyped, but
Yep.
it still was like it. I think it's worth the hype, to be honest.
If it
So
inspires that many people to that extent, I think it
yeah,
deserves all the credit it gets, right? Like it's
totally.
clearly an incredible device, and more than its capability, it inspired people to pick it up and go out and shoot. And maybe people who
That's
hadn't done it very much at all. Like my version of that was the GR3. During the
hmm
pandemic, running around my house with a tiny Polaroid strap just because it weighs nothing. That was slung
yeah,
across my back, and I have
yeah,
countless photos of like my family's life that I
yeah,
just captured with that thing, because it's so unobtrusive and so
yeah,
quiet and so quick. Like, and once you learn that thing, like Becca Versace at The Verge talked about this when she was trying the GR3, she finally like did the comparison and tried it out, and she was like, I get it,
yeah,
but you have to learn it. You have to like
yeah,
really throw yourself into it. But that's so much more satisfying as well, isn't it? Like
totally.
once you know how to drive the thing, like you've had this with the TX, like once you can drive that thing and you can make it do, and you show those pictures to your friends and they say,
Yeah,
wow, like they
yeah,
didn't, they're just like, oh, okay. It's
yeah,
that's the feeling. I feel like that's the dragon we're all chasing with
totally.
photography, is you get that feeling and then you're like, I want that again.
Yeah. It's funny. I pretty much always have the 28 millimeter adapter attached to the X100 because I
Mm,
just like wider images in general. So
yeah.
it's not as like slim and compact as it could be because it's got an extra lens about this big on it.
Yeah.
But it's still small and I can still throw it in my bag, and you know, it's
Yeah.
great.
And also, I think restricting yourself to one or maybe two focal lengths with an adapter, I think is also good as well, because it forces you
Yeah,
to just do it. Like, just
totally.
take the photo, get the shot, get the moment. Likelihood is you're not capturing a lot of the images
Yeah,
on that for anything
yeah.
special. You're doing their memories for you, aren't they? So
It's kind of
why
nice
not
on the
just get it?
TX1 that the only really usable lenses are the 45 and the 90 because I just have both of
Mm,
them with me and I can hot swap them if I need to. And I only really use the 90 if it's like a specific landscape shot that I need a longer focal
yeah,
length for. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much a perfect camera. I do wish the lenses were a little faster,
Hmm.
because f4 is kind of difficult to shoot with sometimes, but you
Yeah.
could make it work. Just shoot 800 film in there, and you're fine.
Yeah. You got that lovely texture then as well, like a little bit of
Yeah,
like
and it's not even that
that.
bad. I also like the color of Portrait 800 more.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
more than 400. Is it very different
Mhm.
or?
It's a little. There's subtle differences for sure. I think
Hmm.
it gets less contrast, or like less saturated and less contrasty the higher ISO you go. So
Right.
160 is probably the most saturated, and 400 is right in the middle,
Right.
and then 800 is like a little softer and a little more airy.
Yeah.
So I think people like 400 just because it's more versatile.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
total film trash. I just buy the cheapest Kodak to run through my little point and shoot Canon that I
yeah,
have when I do
yeah. I
it. I'm
mean,
just
that's
like,
all fine
you
too.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I spend enough on Polaroids for
yeah,
that. Although that i2 is staggeringly good. Have you used an
yeah.
i2
I
yet?
have one. Yeah, yeah, I have one.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah,
great, like insanely
yeah.
great. And
It's
actually, when
cool.
you were talking about lenses and doing some research, like doing like writing about and speaking to people who do lenses, I would love to speak to the people who worked on the lens for that.
Oh yeah,
The two guys that would be fascinating just to
yeah, yeah.
see because it's so
I think they
good.
were
It's
like
so much better.
they're like ex Pentax people or something.
Yeah, ex Pentax or ex Olympus, something like that. I looked them
Olympus.
up a while back because I
Yeah,
that was my
yeah,
kind of dream when I was putting together lists of people. I was like, they'd be amazing to talk to. I'd love to talk to lens people or lens people
yeah,
at Leica or somewhere like that as well. Like,
yeah,
talk me through how you make the decisions you make for like where
yeah,
these things are going to sit and what you're trying to do. Because yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I have an SLR 680 that came from Brooklyn film camera, in fact.
Oh yeah, cool.
Um, yeah, I got it from there. That was really great. And I should really let it go because the i2 is just like
Yeah.
better at
Well, at
everything, but
least
I
the
can't.
680 looks nice as well, and
It
it's
does.
it's foldable, so that's something
It
you can't get.
it focuses with sound, man.
Yeah. Oh,
Like,
you have the sonar. You have the sonar version.
yeah.
Yeah. I
It's
have the
so good.
SX70 sonar as well, and that's awesome. And it's so
Yeah.
fast too. It's like faster than a lot of digital autofocus
Oh yeah.
systems.
It's crazy, and it can see in the dark. And I do love that there's that through line with the i2
Yeah.
where that uses lidar, so it kind of feels
Yeah.
a,
Similar.
a version of the same thing. It's also still defeated by a window. Like you can't
Yeah.
focus through a
Yeah.
window at
Right.
someone.
Right. Totally.
Yeah, it's kind of like that weird consistent thing. I was like, well, the first thing I did with my i2 was take a blurry photo of myself reflected in a window. I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, of
Yeah.
course that was never going to work.
Right.
I'm an idiot. I have to lock the focus. But yeah,
Right.
well, look, we've managed to talk for a very long time, which I've loved, but we've not touched on your lenses, which are the
Right.
kind of pretendy conceit for us even bothering to have a conversation at all. But it sounds like you have three that you picked.
Yeah.
Are any of them the TX lenses or are
Yeah,
these
so
Fuji?
two of them are the Fuji TX1 lenses.
Brilliant. Good.
Yeah, I mean the 45 mil is what's crazy is when I bought it, those lenses were like $300 used, and now they're like over 1,000. So I think people are starting to understand how good they are. Yeah, they're really
Yeah.
really good. They have a really really interesting design, and I meant to bring them in today, but I forgot. But the 45 mil uses this weird piston system for the aperture blades. That when you're closing down the aperture ring, it pushes these pistons up to kind of like turn the aperture, and it's got a very special design where the aperture blades are perfectly circular when it's wide open, and it's perfectly circular when it's fully closed down, but nothing in the middle. And I'm not sure how they did
Wow.
that.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I'm going to ask them when I eventually do this documentary.
Yeah.
Because it's such an interesting weird design. And then they've got this interesting coating on the lenses that makes them like really rainbow and colorful. And, they're made of like, I think they're made of, I don't know if it's aluminum or titanium, but they're very, 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 very pretty lenses.
Yeah.
And again, just like they're medium format. So
Yeah.
the fact that you can fit a medium format lens in that size, and the 90 millimeters also really good, and also went way up in price since I bought mine. I actually left one in an airport one time by accident, and got so stressed about it, I just bought another one on eBay immediately, but I bought it for like $300 and now they're up to like
Yeah.
1,000 as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, those lenses are just incredible, and all the landscape stuff, all the stuff I've done on them have just, they always come out well. The color is awesome, the sharpness is good, but like has a very specific look that I just like, that kind of just feels like a TX1 to me. I think it's
Yeah.
just because
Yeah.
it's a very specific lens. And then my third one is, I was trying to think about this because I was like, those are just my two favorite lenses ever. I think the Fujifilm XF 80 millimeter 2.8 for the X system
Okay.
is one of my favorite lenses too. And I think I have a little bit of an association with that lens because when I was first starting out doing product photography, I picked it because I was looking into a lot of like photography psychology stuff when I was trying to learn photography. And there's a lot about like when you're shooting portraits, if you want someone to look powerful, you shoot up at them and use longer lenses for portraits because of the compression and these kind of things. And so when I was doing product photography, I started using the 80 mil because I was like, okay, well, you should shoot a product like you shoot a portrait, right? Because if you're shooting a portrait to sort of isolate a subject and make them look good, why not do the same thing for a product?
Yeah.
So for a lot of years, I had this very specific style because full frame equivalent, it's 120 millimeters, and nobody was shooting 120 mil for a phone or for a pair of earbuds.
Right.
And the really cool thing about that lens is it's not the fastest, like 2.8, but it can be used. It's a macro lens and a regular lens, so it can be used as a macro lens. So you could get like really, really close up to certain logos, and you could like in little crevices or like ports on phones and that kind of stuff. It was just such a really, really good all-arounder lens because if I needed to shoot the small details, I could like, you would see me like, this was a very common occurrence at like all these press events. I would be like in the corner, literally like this, trying to get a port because the port was like right there, and I was trying to get it.
Yeah.
And it's stable. It's stabilized too. It's got stabilization in it, which
Okay.
is awesome. And so it was so good for that. It was so good for, I could put a phone over there and then go to the end of the room and try to shoot it from there. Yeah, it was just awesome. And I think it has really nice bokeh. You know what's kind of funny is that one of the most legendary Fuji XF lenses is the 56 mil 1.2, and I actually hated that lens because it doesn't have that many aperture blades, so the bokeh is always like hexagonal and when it's wide open, and I never liked that, so I always ended up shooting it at f2 because it was more circular. And then if you're shooting it at f2, like just use the compact 50 mil.
Yeah, what's the point? Yeah,
exactly. So but the 80 I think was like really good. It was just super versatile, even though it was huge. And at that point in time, the industry has matured a lot, and everyone is way better now. At the time in like 2016, there wasn't much of a standard for tech product photography. Everyone was sort of just like not good, and a lot of people were like, wow, this is like crazy seeing like high quality photos of products. And I'm just like, you just got to shoot everything like you shoot people. So I would always do things like putting a phone here and then shooting from below to sort of make it feel like it was like powering over you and that kind of stuff. And I think that lens was important for my career, but now it's just sitting in a box because I haven't shot I haven't shot my XT3 in forever because I've just used the X100V and now 6 as my only digital camera, basically. Sometimes I have a GFX 102 that I occasionally use, and but mostly I'm just shooting film. So
yeah. No, it's really cool. I like the idea of you shooting like the latest Motorola though, like your Platon, and you're turning it into like a head of state for somewhere.
Pretty much.
Sort of
I mean,
like,
if you watch any of my old Android Authority videos, they were all shot like that. All those, and then all the photos that I made for that website. So, yeah.
I really like that. I think that's super cool. And I also love that when you were describing, like, for listeners, like at arm's length, holding things far away, and like,
Yeah,
that's
right.
basically my rangefinder life. Like, the thing
Yeah.
I say to my friends all the time are like, you should get a Leica Q. I'm like, no, I'm happy with my M. The M is
Uh-huh.
perfect. It's fine.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't not I'm not jealous of your close focus because I think
Yeah.
you've got a reason for doing it. Like when I used a Q2 mono once for like a couple of hours. They let me try one.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I kind of got drunk on it and enjoyed it, and like loads of close up photos at 1.7 of
Sure.
blades of grass.
Uh-huh.
But then in the evening, I was
Totally
like,
agree with that.
yeah, like you had a
Yeah.
reason to get that kind of close focus and kind of fall off, and like you want to
Right.
highlight a detail or highlight a feature in a kind of visually interesting way, and like macro is
Mhm.
good for that. But like most of my life, a 35 f2.8 is perfect, right? Like,
Yeah.
and actually 70 centimeters close focus distance. Sometimes it would be nice to have 50 or 35, but actually,
Yeah.
what if I just put a longer lens on and stand a bit further back? And then
Right.
actually I'll get
Exactly.
a very,
Exactly. Yeah.
this is when it becomes boring, is because you look at your bag with like a 28, a 35, and a 50, and I've kind of got
Yeah.
this covered. Like there's
Yeah. It's
not
a
a lot
little
I
bit
can't
more
do.
fun to move with your feet, you know? Zoom with your
Yes.
feet. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm
Yeah.
primes person through and through. I don't
Yeah.
I don't know that I could use a zoom. Like I think I'd have to relearn so much stuff that I
Mm.
think I'd have to be willing to go through the discomfort of feeling like I don't know what I'm doing again, because
Yeah.
I'm so much in the mode of it's my 35 or my 50, and that's just
Right.
how I see the world, and my brain can just compute that, and the distance
Yeah.
between what my
I
mind sees so
I
much
don't
shorter.
like using zooms at all. Every time I
Mm,
try to use them, I end up like I don't know. I end up zooming in to a certain focal length, and then it's like it's weird in between, and then I go on my computer and I'm like, why
mm.
didn't I just shoot that at like exactly 35 or exactly 50? Because something in between is doesn't feel quite right, and maybe it's just that
Yeah,
unfamiliarity with
yeah,
how it feels, maybe. But I don't know. I just
yeah.
like
Well,
prime lenses are more fun.
yes. Well, you see, that's the clip that I will use shamelessly to pretend you're talking about the podcast.
Good.
That has been the thing. There have been previous guests who've thought that they could only choose a prime lens, and like one of them was like, "Well, I kind of use zooms. I don't really." It's like, no, that's just it's just a name.
It's just a
Like you don't
name.
need to
Yeah.
worry. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a
Yeah.
stupid thing I chose. But yeah, oh, well, that is brilliant. Well, I
Cool.
look forward to seeing the documentary.
Yeah.
That sounds like it will be a really beautiful project to work on.
Yeah, I'm super excited. You should get my friend GX Ace on YouTube, Casey Kavanaugh. He's a close friend
I
of
would
mine.
love to. Yes, that
Yeah.
would be amazing. If you can hook a person up, like that
Yeah,
would be
totally.
amazing. Like,
He knows a lot more
yeah,
about about like actual lens design and stuff than I do, so I
his
think he
videos are just such a treat as well.
yeah.
Like there's so much care and love goes into it. The one he posted not that long ago about missing out, like taking his film camera into the woods, and I can't remember which camera it
Oh
was now,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
the heartbreak of coming home and realizing that the settings weren't right, and you've
Yeah.
just done it to rolls of film, and just
Hmm.
oh,
Yeah.
really felt. But it made for really compelling and interesting content, because I
Yeah,
think people should talk about the screw
exactly.
ups. They shouldn't
Right.
just post the stuff that looks amazing.
Yeah.
They should
Yeah.
also post like, this was when I screwed up. I
Right.
messed up my kid's birthday,
Yeah.
because they stay with us. Those experiences, they
Yeah.
make us want to be better. But
Yeah.
yeah, well, David, thank you. I've loved this. Genuinely, it's been fantastic. I'm so excited. You were on my at Christmas when I made the list of people to talk to.
Oh,
Like
cool.
I can check you off my Apple Notes list today. Like I was just like, yes, I got David, because you were so lovely and spoke to me when the M11 first came out, and we were chatting a bit on Instagram about that. And
Mm.
now I have one, which is just a little bit of a dream come true. It's quite
Yeah.
exciting. So it was
Same.
nice that like there's a little through line
Oh
there.
yeah. Awesome. Cool,
Yeah, it's
man.
really lovely. Well, thanks for talking. Is there anywhere you want to point people to while you're on before we kind of wrap up?
Sure. Yeah. I have a YouTube channel. It's not really camera. Well, there's some camera related stuff on there. It's kind of technology and society and some camera stuff. But that's just under my name, David Imel. And then my Instagram is David Imel, and most of my socials are David Imel, and my website's davidimel.com. So pretty easy. I think you can just search my name and then the kind of content you're looking for, and you'll find it.
Yeah. Some of us are interesting to find on the internet. We've been around it long enough. Just type us in. Cool.
And I have some new hyper panoramic stuff coming out soon. Because I've been shooting a lot on a 6x24 medium format camera. So yeah,
Wow.
very wide. Very wide.
Very wide.
Very wide.
Will those go into the scanner you've got, or do you need to flatbed that? How does that work?
Yes, it can go in, but I have to scan it in multiple parts and stitch it.
Right.
It's really, really long. It's too long. I think I've landed on my favorite format ever is 6x17. And
right. Wow.
64 by or 65 by 24 is the X-Pan format, and it's really great, but I think 6x17 is my new favorite format. I made a video on this YouTube channel called The Studio where I used a 3D printed camera, and it's a 3D printed 6x17 camera, and some of my favorite landscape shots I've made were on there. So it's just a format that I'm just like in love with. And the 6x24 that I found that I have is like a really, really old. It's a Technorama 6x17, which was made by Linhof, and it has a mask Technorama 624. It has a mask for 617. So right. I need to get the mask so I can shoot it in 617, but I've been kind of eyeing one of the Technorama 617 Mark IIIs, but they're like $6,000 because it's Linhof. But they use large format lenses. So my 617 uses an 8x10, or 624 uses an 8x10 lens, which is crazy. But yeah, I just sent that in to be developed. So we'll see how it comes out.
Yeah, the waiting game. That's very, very cool, very exciting. Yeah. Although hearing you say that I think 6x17 is like my favorite format is like hearing someone like you're at the bar and your friends like, I think I'm just going to only walk everywhere. Like, I think you've just made your life very difficult, but in a potentially really satisfying way. Like, you're like, no, promise, when I get there, it's going to be great.
Well, what's funny is the 3D printed camera, I think, is more enjoyable actually to use than the like really high quality Linhof camera. So I'm probably going to be using that more. But then, of course, if I'm willing to go a little bit shorter, the X-Pan and the TX1 are just really amazing cameras. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, variety's the spice of life. You gotta have something to pick up, and it makes you realize what you've got with the other one. You know.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
All right.
Well, have an amazing rest of the day. Thanks so much for that, man. Really loved it.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll catch you later.
Take care.
Bye.
If you like Prime Lenses, then make sure you're subscribed on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also sign up to our newsletter at ianfarrell.com/sign-up, and there's a link to that in the episode description. It's really good to hear from you, and I've been getting a load of messages and feedback, so please keep that coming. You're all making the show better, especially you, Dirk. Right, that'll do for now. Have a great week. See you next time.